Hello, everyone. This is Jim Renacci, and we have another episode of the Buckeye War Room. We're looking forward, as I say, to talk about Ohio politics, Ohio issues, and even Ohio candidates. Today, it's a pleasure for me to have Judge Hensal. Judge Hensal is currently serving her second term on the 9th District Court of Appeals. It covers Summit, Medina, Wayne, and Lorain counties. Prior to that, she was assistant law director in Wadsworth and assistant prosecutor in Medina. She also served in private practice for 20 years as a lawyer with over 30 years experience in the law, even serving as a visiting judge on the Ohio Supreme Court 3 times. So, Judge Hensal, welcome to the program. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, running for an election as a judge is always an interesting process because you've got the top of the ticket, you've got, statewide candidates, and people just don't pay attention. The judge races always seem to be the last race that people pay attention to, and I'm sure you're finding that out. How's the race going, and how are things with the election so far?
It's going very well. Judges, we started last September, about a year ago. So we've been at it for about 12 months now with a very short window of time left to go. Everyone seems very energized in our 4 counties and obviously across the nation with it being a presidential year. We ran in a presidential year the first time I was elected in 2012. It was a presidential year. So it's not like I'm unaware of what the difference that makes. But this time, there seems to be more interest in the judicial races.
Well, that's true. And for the first time, I don't believe in your race, but we do put the R&D after judicial races in certain races. Is that the case in Ohio now?
Yeah, so for me, this will be the first time I have an R after my name. Because it started with the 2022 election with the Ohio Supreme Court races and the Ohio Appellate Court races, but not the trial courts. That's still the case, that it's not a party designation on the ballot for the trial court judge races, but for a Supreme Court and Appellate Court, we have the designation. This will be the first time for me to have the party designation on the ballot.
Well, it's interesting. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, but hopefully it's good for you. But let's change that subject, talk about a few things. The climate has changed since you took the bench in 2012. It seems more and more that progressives are trying to politicize our justice system in the last few years. What are your thoughts? Tell me what you think about. Let's face it, politics should stay out of the justice system.
Most definitely. And I think perhaps it's almost like a light bulb went off and everyone discovered, hey, that judicial branch has some interest to me, and what they do is important to me. So of course, that means we have more cases coming to us that have maybe some political beginnings. They don't necessarily, they should stay out of the courtroom, but we have different types of cases, and the Court of Appeals doesn't just take all the appeals from all the cases that come in the lower courts, but we do have some jurisdiction for original actions. Things like writs that say you should tell this person they don't have authority to do this. You should order them to stop doing XYZ, and those have increased significantly.
Yeah, well, it's like I say, it's interesting how we've politicized the system, but it's one of those things that I think progressives want to make more and more talk about and discussion about. But look, with all the national attention, this is a as you said, a presidential race year. How do you get your message out? How do you draw attention to the importance of your specific race?
That's a good question. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. A couple things have changed in Ohio. They have moved the judicial races up on the ballot so that we're not at the bitter end, so that that in and of itself creates a little more interest because people do a lot of individuals take a look at the ballot prior to voting, even voting day if they vote, or if they're absentee, they have it in front of them on the kitchen table. But in order to generate interest in the race, I think you have to have some understanding by the electorate about why it's important to them. If they've never been to the Court of Appeals. As a matter of fact, a lot of individuals, including lawyers, don't have any idea who we are. They don't know they have in the 9th District 5 Court of Appeals judges, 3 sit on every case. They don't know that we are we serve 6-year terms. So what we do to try to generate and get understanding with the electorate to get them informed is we do not only outreach through the through a non-election re-election years, but we do a lot of the education when we're out talking to everyone, to public groups, to partisan groups, to talking on podcasts like this about what it is and what we do and why it's important, because that's really the only way to generate interest. It's an independent judiciary, so you're not going to hear, you shouldn't ever hear your judges talking about what their personal opinions are on interests of great importance. So you have to explain to them the reason why it's important to have experienced, honest judges with integrity that will serve impartially and not let political influence get into the courtroom.
You know, it's interesting. You said something there that made me think. I was in business for 35 years. I only ended up in the Court of Appeals one time. And look, when you're in business, you're always going to have disagreements. There's always going to be issues, especially for me. I had multiple businesses. But I wonder what the percentage is of people that ever really do get in front of the Court of Appeals. But my question really is for those that don't know, what cases, you hear cases from what courts? They're appealed from what courts?
So we hear everything. We hear civil matters, as you indicated, civil business matters. We hear criminal cases. We hear divorce cases. Something that could have started with the Board of Zoning Appeals decision comes up through the court. Board of Tax Appeals. So we hear taxation cases as well. Just about every single thing where there is a dispute and there are more than one side, which of course there always is, right? Then it comes up through the process. Some have more stops along the way before they get to us. And then, as I mentioned, with original actions, we sometimes have things that are filed directly to our court asking us to order something to happen or not to happen. And in addition to that, so you have an appeal as of right to the Court of Appeals, without a doubt. But you cannot get to the next level, the state Supreme Court, unless the state Supreme Court says they will take the case. It has to be a matter of great statewide importance or a matter where the appellate districts are in conflict with each other. So there's a disjointing of the law throughout the state. So our court's very important because it's court of last resort. So if you think about how few people get to the Court of Appeals, and we are very busy, so from our perspective, there's a lot of folks getting to the Court of Appeals, which is great, but not very many get to the Ohio Supreme Court. For most cases, it ends with us.
Well, you know, it's interesting. As you were talking, I remembered my case, and it was brought up even when I ran for politics. I had an issue where I appealed my state income taxes all the way through to the Court of Appeals. I did lose at the Court of Appeals, and then I appealed it to the Supreme Court and actually won in the Supreme Court. So I was one of those ones that did get past the Court of Appeals. But I don't think people realize how much you have coming your way from all matters. But it is primarily criminal and what were you saying, the other issues that come to your way?
Right. So we'll have many criminal cases. We'll have domestic relations cases, juvenile court cases, which could be a lot of different things. They could be where the state is going to take custody of a child who's been adjudicated dependent, neglected, or abused. We have probate cases where, there's some matter of litigation or guardianship. So there are a lot of criminal cases because you are entitled to appointed counsel.
So basically, every case in the lower courts can end up in the Court of Appeals, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
every single one. We sit on the reason, I think another reason why people don't really know about how important we are and who we are is you're not going to see a courtroom picture with a jury box and witnesses and individuals testifying. That's not where the bulk of our work is done. We have the entire record that came up through the trial court, if it started there, and even different agencies, if it started in an agency. We have the entire record. We have the briefs by the parties, and those are filed, and then the case is argued, and each side gets 15 minutes to argue. So if you think about what you've seen in terms of, I know you have experience in it, so you know what it looks like. But if you think about it, like being a Supreme Court argument, they even get a little more time at the Supreme Court than we give them at the Court of Appeals to argue. But most of the work and all of the law is in the background, where we are deciding the cases with the research and writing that we do after the cases are heard on the docket. So no surprise that people don't understand that it's because just no one's out there taking pictures.
Well, look, you have a great rounded experience being a prosecutor to private practice to serving the state Supreme Court. How does that experience translate to your ability to do what you do at the appeals court?
Yeah, so I do thank you for noting that. I do have a great deal of experience in private practice, and I had a broad base in my private practice. It's very important because since we hear everything that comes up, all different areas of the law. Also, however, I think what's very important for a Court of Appeals judge is to have a lot of time in the courtroom. Not all lawyers spend a lot of time in the courtroom. So as a prosecutor, you're very busy. You're in the courtroom all the time. And in private practice, it takes a little bit longer maybe to get your case into the courtroom. However, if you spend a lot of time in there, you get to understand when you're reviewing the records what happened. Though we can only review what we call a cold record, it's transcribed. We're not in the room with the folks, so you get to understand how some things happen in the lower courts that because you have that much experience in the courtroom, that you would be surprised. For instance, the court reporter can't take down a shrug. When someone's pointing, counsel has to make sure it gets in the record, because it doesn't mean anything to the Court of Appeals if it's not in the record, or if it was a conversation behind, or when the court reporter wasn't recording. So that makes your maybe intuitive sense of how these things go through the court system very important. It also gives you, if you have a broad base like I do, gives you an understanding of the law before you do the deep dive into the law that's relevant to the case. It also does another thing that's very, very important to me, because I think it's extremely important to the parties. It helps you understand that whatever your opinion is, and whatever you want to talk about in terms of the law, it's not important in your decision. You have to have judicial restraint. You have to only address what's argued before you, and you have to only discuss those things that are in the record. So, for instance, let's say the court came up with an idea about how they think the law should be, the statute or the law, or what they think someone should have argued, but that didn't get argued. That doesn't belong anywhere in the decision, because the worst thing that could happen to an individual is in court. In the Court of Appeals. Is the court decides it's going to decide the matter on something that wasn't argued, that they never got a chance to respond to. And good luck, because like I said, the Supreme Court only takes so many cases, so it's done if we just go off on some tangent about what we think.
Well, let me ask you, with such a big district to cover in your race, how do you get people involved to help? And what is the message you're looking to get out? And anybody that's watching this, what can they do to help you?
I appreciate that. Because it's a presidential year, the volunteers, the folks out there are very energized in terms of getting the word out. But it's important to have those discussions with your friends and family about how important judicial races are, and how they should find out who the candidates are. There are a lot of resources to find that out. This is one of them, obviously, but there are a lot of online resources to find out who those judicial candidates are. I think it's just that you have to be able to generate a recognition of how important it is. That's helpful to a judicial candidate in and of itself, because people then understand I have to vote. I'm not sure that me saying, well, you should all sit down and spend a lot of time researching who your judicial candidates are. It only takes a second to get online and figure out who these folks are, find out who's on the ballot, find out who's running. And that is the most help that you can give a candidate like me who's seeking re-election, because you can see all of the experience that I have, and it will help you understand who's out there on the ballot.
Look, I'm hoping that this podcast helps people get to know who you are. I'm hoping that people in Summit, Medina, Wayne, and Lorain counties will watch this, get to know you, get to know your experience, realize that what a great asset we have in you in the Court of Appeals, and they get out to vote. So thank you for being on today, and good luck in November.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this is a Buckeye War Room episode, and again, we're talking Ohio politics, Ohio issues, Ohio legislation. We're going to continue to have this message and build this message by bringing people in that are either running or in our legislation. But again, it's always best to understand and get to know the people. That's what we hope to provide. So thank you for being here. And this is Jim Renacci signing off.